The website down there at the bottom has an incredible amount of information on growing iris, as well as links to all of the sections and cooperating societies that specialize in certain types of iris. So there'll be a reblooming iris society. And here's their magazine. AIS membership is $25 a year, or there is a new e-membership for $15 a year that will give you the AIS bulletin, this quarterly bulletin, 4 times a year. Email, e-membership is, of course, by email. And I have some examples, if you care to look at them later on, of what the AIS bulletin encompasses. The AIS, American Iris Society, also maintains the registry for all rhizomaceous iris. And by rhizome, this is a very dead rhizome of a PCI, Pacific Coast native iris. It didn't survive this last summer, unfortunately. By comparison, this is the rhizome of a Louisiana iris, just to show you the size difference. Another rhizomaceous iris, Spuria iris, do very well here. The registry also contains the bearded iris registry, and this is what everyone is probably very familiar with, your bearded iris. And its type of rhizome, which is closer looking to a potato than a root, but they're all rhizomes which are modified stems. Currently, AIS has they call it a wiki, a T-wiki site for iris, and they're estimating right now that there are about 68,000 iris that are registered with AIS. So when someone asks me, can you identify this iris, I sort of go, well, no. I for some reason, have a very hard time remembering which is which is why it's very important, if you purchase an iris, keep track of its name. The AIS encompasses both the United States and Canada. Both countries are divided into regions. San Diego happens to be in Region 15 of the American Iris Society, which covers Southern California, as far north as Lompoc. There is a club up there. And all of Arizona. There are 3 clubs currently in Arizona that are all part of Region 15. Our society was established in 1963. We are an affiliate of the American Iris Society. Our meetings that are described there, we have about 5 meetings a year at a historic church in Lakeside, and sort of 3 additional party dates throughout the year. And anyone can join our society for a mere $5. And with that membership, you will receive our monthly newsletter, as well as being able to participate in all our events, which anyone can do for no matter what anyway. You don't have to be a member to come to our meetings. Okay. Covers that. Today I plan to discuss those iris that you are most likely to be asked questions about here as Master Gardeners. There are a large number of iris species, close to 300, depending on which website you look at, 250 to 300. Most of them, not all, but most, will do fine somewhere in San Diego County.
Is that the bearded one you're talking, 300?
No, all species.
All,
All
okay.
species. And if I'm jumping ahead, but I'll get to that in just a sec. So the iris flowers and their rhizomes have been used for medicine, perfume, coloring, flavoring, and it's been prominent in art and literature. The fleur de lis that you'll see in French heraldry or medieval heraldry is a depiction of an iris. Representations of iris have been found in art as far back as 2100 BC. And the plant was given the name of the Greek goddess of the rainbow, and you can tell why. They come in all colors. Bearded iris, however, are never found in true red. They don't have the right genetics for it, enzymes. Let's see, so, okay, moving forward. Okay, I'd like you to refer to the next page in the handout. This lists all the species in the genus Iris, and the hybridizer or taxonomists have recently added the newest one, which is towards the very, very end, is the Hardicanda, if I say that right, candy lily. And I actually bought some seeds, and they were quite easy to germinate, and they're currently in my front yard. But of the genus Iris, divided into two sections, the beardless apigon iris and the bearded eupagon iris. I'm going to start with the beardless iris. And iris are very curious in that all species in the genus Iris are northern hemisphere. You don't find any in Africa, South America. They all originated in the northern hemisphere, United States, North America, Asia, Europe. So as such, they are found across a wide range of climates, and you should be able to find a bearded iris that will grow here somewhere in any garden situation, whether it's wet or dry, hot or cold, or shade or sun. I have some that are full shade actually. The first group I'm going to talk about are the Siberian iris. These originated China, Himalayas, and Siberia in Russia. They do tolerate low temperatures, need moisture, neutral soil. They grow wonderfully up north. I'll show you pictures that I've taken up in Oregon. And I do know that there's one cultivar, Caesar's brother, that I've seen growing up in LA. And I don't know which cultivar you have.
It's a blue and white one. I don't remember the name of it,
Okay.
but I have it.
So there are some that will adapt to our hot climate. And if you want to try others, I suggest trial and error. Who knows what you'll get. The main thing with all of the beardless rhizomaceous iris, that when you transplant, never let the rhizome dry out. Remember that. So this is an example of a Siberian iris up in Oregon. And I'm showing you this just so you can see the growth characteristics of the iris. Flowers are supposed to be held up above the leaves. Close-up of the flower itself. This cultivar is called black garnet. Here's another one that I just loved up in Oregon. Close-up of it, bluebird kisses. Now, naming of all of these flowers is done by the hybridizer, who has made the cross. He registers the name with the American Iris Society. When he has enough of that cultivar and decides that it's worthwhile, he is required to offer it for sale, which is called introduction, and then it's officially registered with the AIS. Here's another clump. Once again, the flowers are held up above the clump of leaves. This is Encore Performance.
Solar energy.
Exactly. That's solar energy. It was one of the very bright ones up in the Oregon garden. So, and this is Caesar's brother. I saw it up in LA, San Fernando, in the hills up to just to the north of the LA basin. It was growing on the north side of a fence, so it got shade during most of the day. And I just ordered a cultivar because I'm going to try it out lakeside and see what happens. That's all you can do, is see what happens with a lot of these. Next group I'm going to talk about are the Japanese iris. These are highly hybridized from a native species in Japan, over 500 years of hybridization efforts. They may have multiple falls, and I haven't gone into the parts of an iris. Petals that stand up are called standards. Petals that fall down are called falls. And an iris has 3 of each. So with the Japanese iris, highly hybridized, to have 3, 6, 9, I've actually saw reference to a 12. But the colors are limited to purple, blue, and a white, red, violet. They do require moisture during the growing season and absolutely require acidic soils, which means here, for the most part, you're going to have to grow them in a pot with azalea potting mix, lots of peat moss. What's unique about these, or different, is that the rhizomes don't spread out, which is what is most of the rhizomaceous iris do. You can see this thing is sort of growing from where my hand starts up. The rhizomes of the Japanese iris grow on top of each other. And so if you plant one, the next one comes up on top of it, next one on top of it. And since they must be kept moist all the time in a pot, it means you have to keep adding dirt to the pot to keep that rhizome covered. But then because it's in a pot, probably have to divide it every 3 years. They need a balanced 12-12-12 type fertilizer. However, never feed them bone meal. Don't put them in a concrete pot, because the calcium, when it acidifies in that acid media, creates an acid, calcium oxide that is toxic to those iris. So no bone meal. Dappled shade inland. Keep the roots cool. Try to put the pot inside another pot so the sun's not hitting the outside of the pot and cooking it. And once again, don't let the rhizomes dry out during transplant. This is, now all these pictures, next 3 I got from the web. This is a 3-fall version of the Japanese iris. Here is a 6-fall version. A 9-fall version. I don't have a 12-fall. And the reason I'm showing you this is because this is a Japanese iris I saw growing again in a garden in the San Fernando Valley, or hillsides up above LA. It was in the ground. I'm not quite sure how she got it going. Under an eave, so it would get strong sun in the summer or in the winter, but was fully shaded in spring. And the gardener said that it had been fading. So who knows, but it's definitely worth trying if you want to. If you've got a area for a pot in your yard. And just remember, if you have any questions about growing any of these iris, once again, go to the American Iris Society website. There will be a link to how to grow various iris. There is a separate society for Japanese iris, and they have incredible amount of information on their own website. Pacific Coast iris. These are native to California, Oregon, and Washington. There are 12 species spread through up and down the coast. They have, hybridizers have developed over 1,000 hybrids that have been named, introduced, and registered. Soil conditions, neutral to slightly acidic, moderate or dappled shade, water in summer. Plants can take drought, though they sure didn't in my yard. Plant or transplant, mid-November or December. A member of our society, Dr. Richard Richards, has grown Pacifics for many, many years. His advice and the advice of the Pacific Coast Iris Society is do not transplant any other time of year. Now, I have seen PCIs offered in one of the local nurseries, and of course you get this nice pod of little iris, and you say, wow, I want to get it out of the ground. No. Keep it in the shade, keep it watered throughout the summer, and wait until November, December to stick it in the ground. Be aware they're very, very picky, temperamental. Dr. Richard Richards says he's killed more than he's kept alive. Once again, however, with these guys as well, do not let the rhizome dry out when you transplant. One of the recommendations, if you are transplanting, is you've got a clump, cut it in half, take half of the clump, work on it, leave the other half, just in case that what you work on is very unhappy and dies. This is from the Pacific Coast Native Iris website, Society's website. A picture of the native iris, I. Douglasiana, which is the most common species in California, as seen at Point Reyes National Park. This is another native species. What's up right at the border of Oregon and Washington. Now the hybridizers, before I get into that, this is what a PCI clump looks like in my front yard right now. It's in more or less complete shade. It gets morning sun, some water, which is what it takes in my yard in Lakeside. And this is what it would look like most of the year. But when it bloomed this last spring, this is what its flowers look like. Canyon snow is very accommodating. It might be a good, if you want to try one in your yard, this might be a good cultivar to try. This is one I saw up in Victoria, British Columbia. Close up a bit. This is another one I saw in British Columbia. And these are pictures taken from a website of a hybridizer who offers these for sale. And you can see how the native form has been developed by the hybridizers over the years. With the colors, the widening of the falls, and the color patterns. And the next species I'll talk about are the Louisiana iris, which I have a few pots of up here. And that's the rhizome that I showed you. Oh, what did I do? Rhizome that I showed you, this big ruddy looking thing, very, very tough. You need a knife to divide it. They are the state flower of Louisiana, found in the swamps and dry banks, various species, five native species. They're widely accommodating in how you can grow them. You can sink a pot of them in a pond, put them in the ground, which I've seen, or in my case, out in Lakeside, I put them in big pots. Originally, for 3-4 years, I grew them without drain holes in the pot, so I create a swamp in a pot, basically. More recently, I'm putting in the tiniest of drain hole in the pot so that when I water it, the water really percolates and gets the potting mixture good and moist, so they never really totally dry out. Once again, acidic soil, I use azalea potting mix with some peat moss mixed into it. And never allow that rhizome, which I've got up front, which is going to go in the trash can after today, to dry out.
About light requirements.
Mine are growing out in full sun. They don't look very pretty right now because they're pretty well toasty. The leaves do die back somewhat in the summer, and then you'll end up with a big tall bushy pot in the spring. My first experience with the Louisiana, I purchased one Louisiana rhizome, stuck it in that little foam pot in September. This is what it looked like 9 months later. And that cultivar is called Frederick Douglass. Very, very popular, especially at our shows. And so this is just a series of pictures of the color range that you might see in Louisiana iris. And I think I have pots of these available if you're interested. Right. Yeah, camera pictures are not quite true to what you actually see out in the garden.
So is it more red or more purple?
It's purple, definitely a rich purple. Okay, next species I'll discuss are the Spuria iris. These are all hybrids of native species found throughout Europe, Spain, France to Russia. They do really well in dry summer areas. Full sun, or at least 6 hours of sun a day. They do like good drainage. They're accommodating on our soil here, so neutral alkaline is just fine. There's there is a Spuria Society website, and there's some discussion on the website about what fertilizer, how much manure, to manure, not to manure, on there. I just use a balanced fertilizer. And they will form large clumps. They're dividing. If you don't want to, you can just let them get bigger and bigger and bigger. And they spread out readily. If you dig a clump, very likely there'll be some rhizomes left in the ground that you'll miss. So it'll be hard to get rid of. This is a Spuria clump that was growing from one rhizome. This is a 1.5 years later. Okay, this is a close-up of the flower. Now it looks very, very similar to the Dutch iris, but it's not. These grow from rhizomes. The Dutch iris, English iris, grow from bulbs. And I'm not going to talk about any bulbed iris today because that's not what the American Iris Society registers. The bulbed iris are registered in the Netherlands. And you saw that clump, looks wonderful, right? This is what it looks like at the moment. This is its summer Summer, you don't water it, it dies back. That's it. This can be normal. This is normal for Spurria because the dogma is don't water it in summer. In Lakeside, it's getting some water, but this one still died back. I have other clumps that are located on the south side of a wall under the eaves of my house, and they've been shaded throughout the summer, but now that the sun angle's getting back over, they're starting to dry out too. So they stayed green through the summer, but now they're starting to go, and will need to be cut back. This is just various Spurria, just to show you the colors that are possible.
Look at that.
This hybridizer has very unusual names to his flowers, to his introductions. His name's Kasperic, and he comes up with some very unusual, usually animal, giraffe canese, meerkat manner, you'll see in a while, and so on. This one does very well. It was highly regarded this last year.
Wow.
This one looks really, really pretty, but in my yard it went. So, obviously it was not happy. I didn't treat it right. But there's plenty more where that came from. Okay. Now I'm going to, does anyone have any questions on the non-bearded iris at this time? Yes, first.
What's the duration of the bloom?
Would you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, what is the duration of the bloom? Couple days, generally. That's one of the things, goals the hybridizers have to getting the blooms longer, to stand up or stay blooming longer. In the case of the Spurria iris, there's 7, 8, 9 buds, blooms to a stalk. So the fact that one doesn't last a couple days, you've got quite a few more that'll bloom a week. In the back?
My question was about the naming of these plants.
Uh-huh.
For example, I'm not familiar with subgenus and sections and subsections.
Afraid someone was going to ask me that.
I don't want you to, but what I'd like to ask you is, how do you, I don't see anything I don't see the word species on here anywhere.
Right, because that's further on
Further
the,
on, okay.
further in the subsection. For example,
Further on.
yeah, I gotta get the name
So
right.
if you name one of these things to identify it, do you have to name genus iris?
No.
Limneris, cibris?
No, you, for, as far as I know, for AIS, you would say Japanese iris, J-I. For example, the Japanese, that series Lavigate includes 2 species. The species Iris ansata and the species Iris lavigata. Say that right? And let's see, for example, and like PCIs, there were a dozen different species that are within that series of Californicae iris.
And then on top of species, there are cultivars.
Right.
And
Okay, so the species iris would have been that little PCI iris that I showed you that was growing in Point Reyes. When the hybridizers then take various species and start crossing them, or take a species and start making hybrids of it, that is termed, in our terminology, a cultivar. So
And
it's
those
still,
would, those would often be the common names that people use.
right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Do beardless irises tend to die back? What's the rule of thumb for the evergreen irises versus the dieback irises?
It will depend on, I would say depend on the species. I only have experience with the spurias that may or may not die back. The PCIs, obviously that clump is not dying back. And the Louisianas, if I treated them better, they wouldn't die back, but they do tend to lose the big tall leaves and they're now sprouting back out. So if you're after greenery in the garden, I wouldn't, other than the PCIs, which are in the shade, I wouldn't suggest them. There are a number of other species in here. In this section, for example, if you go way, way down to the subgenus cross iris, crested or Ebenezer irises, I have a couple pots of those growing in my shade, and they're green year-round.
Would you say those again, please?
Um,
Oh, I see it.
Where? On page
Yeah.
what?
It's the third page, 3/4 of the way down. It says crested or Evancia iris. Those are strictly shade iris. And I've had a couple pots of those growing in my front entryway. It's almost totally shaded, and I'm still waiting for it to bloom. But it's very, very happy in the pot. I probably need to divide it, fertilize it, make it happy, then it would bloom for me this next year. Okay, there's another question.
Do the beardless irises bloom just once a year, and if so, when is that?
Okay. Do the beardless iris bloom just once a year, and when? Once again, that will vary with the species. And there are reblooming Louisianas. I don't know about the Spuria and others. PCIs, would not expect to see any reblooming characteristics. They're still too native. So it all depends what a hybridizer's created for us. So another question? Okay, one more and then I'll move on.
Are the I have two questions. Are the Spurrier iris pretty readily available in nurseries or catalogs?
Yes.
Okay, and once they go dormant, which they probably will at my house, I live in Ramona,
Mhm.
do you just leave them in the ground and let them be and let them dry out and leave them alone?
Yes.
Okay,
And-
thank you.
Right. In the back of your packet is a how to grow Spuria sheet. Okay, as well as one on Louisiana and one on tall beardies. And also, once again, the Spuria Iris Society's website has additional information on how to grow them. Okay, I'm going to move on to the bearded iris, Eupagon iris. These all originated in the Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, Arab Peninsula type climate. Require 6 hours of sun a day, water to encourage growth, but they can be drought tolerant. Absolutely drought tolerant, actually. There are stories of people buying a bag of iris, giving them to a daughter who throws it in the garage, and a year later plants it and they're just fine. Tall bearded iris, people thin their iris, throw them out in the field, they're growing just fine. So they can survive with minimal water. However, clay soils, if they sit in clay wet soils, they'll tend to rot. And fertilizing, absolutely, they're heavy. All iris are heavy feeders. All iris need feeding. And
What?
Well, once again, it depends on the cultivar, usually on the species, excuse me, not cultivar, species. For example, the bearded iris, the recommendations are to feed after they bloom and in early spring before they bloom to encourage them to bloom. However, you do not want to fertilize them under conditions like this. They'll sit there and maybe rot. Also, watering in the summer. Do not water your iris midday. They'll sit there, especially the tall beardeds, they'll sit there and imagine a potato in hot water, hot soil, they'll just sit there and bake and tend to rot. So mine, I have them on a cycle that they get watered at like 2 a.m. Water early morning, if you can, or late evening.
What kind of fertilizer?
Okay, the bearded iris, anything I can come up with. Any rose food. With the bearded iris, you want a fertilizer that is lower in nitrogen. So NPK, 6-10-10, 5-20-20. They really need the phosphorus though. Right. Yeah, I use rose food. What is it called? Grow Power or something like that. Manure or composted chicken manure, not straight manure. You don't want to cook them because it's too much nitrogen. I've mixed cottonseed meal in with the soil, alfalfa pellets in with the soil. Got to be careful there. Iris love alfalfa. Bearded iris love alfalfa. So any good fertilizer that's got some of the micronutrients in it that's not high in nitrogen for the bearded iris. You remember the Japanese iris, they wanted a 12-12-12. Pacific Coast iris, they actually say you don't need to really worry about fertilizing because in the native environment they don't give a lot. Louisiana's need an acid fertilizer, so whatever you might use for azaleas. Spuria, probably the same as bearded iris. Does that sort of answer the question? And once again, all of this information's on the irises.org website, and one of the societies will have recommendations. Okay, moving along. If we go to the next sheet in your handout, American Iris Society, because there's so many iris, have classified them on criteria based on the flower stalk height as measured from the ground, how tall the flower gets, and the flower's dimensions. Now the miniature dwarf bearded, the MGBs, are a different species of iris, originate from I. Flumella, which is a cold climate native iris. And as far as I know, they really require winter chill to grow, and I'm not sure anyone really is growing them here in San Diego, but who knows, someone might try it up in Descanso. The other classes that you'll see on the handout, the SDBs, are hybrids between those MDBs and tall bearded iris. And depending on how many crosses have been made, there'll be some adaptability, better adaptability here. I am growing SDBs in my yard. I was just recently given some from a friend in Ramona. She grows hers in the shade of her rose bushes. And I put mine in the shade of the rose bushes where they'll get plenty of water. And of the ones I've started, 4 are doing really well. So we'll see.
That would be challenging to divide them, wouldn't it?
They're very small. They're shallow rooted, which is why they need more water. And that's why I'm suggesting if you want to try them, put them where they'll get some shade.
What does SDB actually stand for?
Oh, sorry.
It's a hybrid.
Sorry. Standard dwarf bearded. Didn't I put that in there?
Yes.
I did.
Yes, you did.
Okay. Yeah, at the top of the handout, hard to see. So the classification of sizes goes from left to right. So first you have the miniatures, then the standard, intermediate, miniature tall, bordered, and tall. These are some examples taken of standard dwarf bearded. These are all taken from a website of a hybridizer offering them for sale. Just to show you the colors and the color patterns that are available in these guys.
Do you have a specific name for that little fuzzy beard on the fall?
Beard.
The little
Oh,
orange.
it's just a beard.
It's a beard.
That's the beard.
Yeah. Further on in your packet, there is a sheet that shows the anatomy of an iris. And yes, it is indeed called a beard. And presumably it's there to help direct the bee into the flower. But then the SDB, the beardless iris don't have it, and they get along just fine without it. Okay. The next classification is intermediate iris. So there's wide variation here. However, proportionality of the flower to the height of the stalk is required. All of these have the same cultural requirements as the tall bearded. 6 hours of sun a day, fertilizer, don't put them in clay soil. This is a clump I saw in Victoria, British Columbia, dazzling. It was doing wonderfully there. This is a close-up of it. And these are 2 clumps. They're both intermediate, classified as intermediate bearded iris. The one on the left, the purplish one, is called man's best friend. The one on the right is dazzling. And this is just to show you within this class, the height variation that is possible, but they're still classified as intermediate bearded iris.
But looking down on it, you don't see how far above the top of the leaf the flower is. Is it shorter? Is it closer to the top of the leaf?
Not really.
That's why
Not bad.
looking down on it, you can't tell.
Right. Here, if you, once
There you
again,
can.
yeah, there it's, ideally, in the case of all the iris, the flower is, on the stalk, is supposed to be above the leaves. That's a criteria.
I see,
Um,
but not as tall as some of the tall.
No,
Okay, I like that one.
there's a close-up of that one. Miniature tall bearded, also called table iris. They're very dainty because they are diploid. All of the tall bearded iris that we enjoy today were hybridized back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Someone made a cross between a couple of native species that resulted in tetraploid iris, 4 copies of every gene. And so what we have today on the bearded iris are all that you'll all see are tetraploid iris, 4 copies. Whereas the miniature tall are still from native species that are diploid. So as a result, they're dainty. However, within this classification, Aroma is considered a plus, because you want to bring them inside and have them smell nice. In the United States, aroma is not a criteria for the bearded iris. There's some bearded iris you wouldn't want to have in the house because they stink, and there's others that are wonderful. This is a miniature tall bearded MTB I saw in Portland. Most of the flowers now here, some of them are starting to get down in the fans, into the leaves. Dolly and Me. I've seen this several times, and every time I've seen it, it's growing wonderfully.
Here in San Diego?
No. But I have it now. I'll tell you in a year. And a close-up of Dolly and Me. I just have this year obtained miniature tall beardeds, and I don't know if Margaret's got any and which one she has, but so there's all sorts of patterns available in these guys and colors. And once again, very small and dainty compared to the tall beardeds. Okay, the border and tall bearded are the final classification. They're the best known. They're what you're going to see in almost all the gardens here in San Diego. They differ only in the flower stalk height and the size criteria. And you have, of course, the wide range of color and patterns possible, except true red. The bearded iris just do not have the right enzyme to make the tomato red pigment. Crop note. Now I'm going to go within the, just in case you see them, I'm going to go through this fast. Within the tall beardeds, you may see certain descriptions of the colors. And in this case, where the standards and falls are basically the same color, they're referred to as a self, S-E-L-F. Here's another self. Not a lemon, smells wonderful.
If you brought any of these over here for sale, could you mention it?
I don't think I have any of these over there, unfortunately. Most of these that I'm showing you are flowers. Okay, back up a step. American Iris Society every year holds a convention somewhere in the United States or Canada. Each region of within the United States holds what's called a trek. Our society hosted a trek last year, 2013, and for a trek, we solicit the hybridizers to send us their newest flowers. So these pictures are all of iris that were blooming in my yard last year.
That one doesn't have any beards.
It's there. It's hidden down. And it's actually...
You had to send them all back?
Yeah.
I got to keep one. Well, actually, there's more description than that. Some of the hybridizers demand them all back. Ask me afterwards. I can explain how this works. Okay, so these were all selves. This is called
That's red.
never say it right. A-M-O-E-N-A. Ammonia.
Color?
Ammonia. It's the color pattern of white standards and color falls. So I'm just telling you in case you hear, oh, it's a wonderful self, you'll know what the heck they're talking about.
Could you spell that Ammonia again?
A-M-O-E-N-A.
Thank you.
This is termed bitone. basically the same color but lighter, darker.
Did you call that one red? That last one?
Well, once again, the hybridizers are trying very hard to create red iris. Everyone wants a red iris. However, if you got down to exactly what is forming this color in pigments, it's not red. So it's just a combinations of colors. There was genetic, biochemical lab trying to make a red iris. I don't know where they are in their efforts.
Insert it.
Yeah, insert the right gene, right. This would be called a blend, multiple colors. And this is Neglecta, light blue, dark blue. Placata, speckled. Variegata with a colored standard, not white, and darker falls of some sort. And this is broken color. Color is there's no specific pattern, it's just sort of random splotches of color. What's it called? Broken color. Here's another broken color iris. Okay, Innocent Devil is a space age iris. If you notice, this is an extension at the end of the beard. Officially, that's called a flounce. This is a space age with flounces. And, no, you can't see them. Can you see it? This is a space age iris with, there's little appendages at the end of the beard that's a horn. Okay. There's a brand new society that's just formed called, that's combining all of the space age, the broken color, the flatties. That's one I don't have a picture of. They actually have an iris now that looks very much, bearded iris, that looks very much like the Japanese, where all the petals are falling down. They're called flatties. So the newest section is called a novelty section. And the very last one I'm going to hit real fast is the arrowbreds. These are hybrids between arrow iris, bearded iris. You probably will not have anyone ask you about arrows. They can be grown here, but they're hard to find. Neutral or alkaline soil. Culture may be similar to tall bearded, but depending on the parentage, basically you've got to find a place it likes. And you can identify them by the shape of the petals and the spot on the falls. This is a arrowbred. I lost its name years ago. I moved it out in the sun. It almost died. I moved it back into park shade, and it's very, very happy. This is another arrowbred that was sent. And notice the way the standards in the falls curve, and that spot there at the front is very distinctive of arrowbred iris. And just to show you this is all I'm going to talk about hybridizing, but I saw this in a garden in Oregon. The hybridizer had made a cross and was evaluating the offspring. And so the two iris on the left are the ones he crossed. The four iris on the right are some of the offspring he was evaluating to decide whether they were good enough to introduce. And this just shows you the effect of having 4 copies of every gene. You don't really have any clue what you're going to get when you make a hybrid of bearded iris.
It's a waste of time.
They're wonderful.
Parents
They're
better.
fun.
You never know.